night, I was actually on the phone with someone who's considering doing the Comprehensive Cancer Wellness Program. This is the emotional component. We tie the knot, okay? It's loosely fitting when one does not know, but when one understands from an emotional standpoint, what is the impact of the decisions that I've made, the things that I'm thinking about into my health? Like how is it that I'm impacted and why am I impacted? Well, there's an emotional component. The Comprehensive Cancer Wellness Program actually teaches about that emotional component. It teaches about how the thought creates and becomes the biology. Can you imagine that? Amazing. So some of the things that we're going to talk to Bryan and Anna about today, I was actually earlier today with a specialist. And this specialist said to me, he said, Caroline, he said, I want you to look up into the sky. And I say to myself, well, I love blue skies. And I want to look up into the sky and see beautiful blue skies. But he pointed out to me some concerns. He explained to me that right now some things are going to be happening. And later today we'll talk to Bryan and we'll ask Anna Maria why she has decided to put her intense intention, because she doesn't do so very often. Only on a very few select times does she actually put her attention into something that she truly believes in. And part of that would be some of the organic clothing. And that's next level. That's really next level. But right now, one of the things that we're really focused on is how is it that the EMFs, the electromagnetic frequencies, are impacting our lives. Okay, so what happened earlier today with me is I looked up into the sky, and somebody who is very astute and very well studied in EMFs explained to me what's going to be happening. There's going to be 20,000 satellites that potentially are going to go up for 5G. That's a big concern. Okay, because those satellites are actually going to be, there's going to be created like somewhat of a grid, and in that grid, when we're going to have metals that'll actually allow the particulates to utilize that 5G. Now, while I am just in the beginning phases of learning all this, I am very electromagnetically sensitive. So I don't like to talk on my phone for too long, and I'm careful with where I go and how I do that. So one of the new accomplishments of Anna Maria, and she'll speak more about that, is our Hippocrates HHI pulse. The concept is getting back to nature. And how do we get back to nature is we surround our biology with something that helps support our biological cell and helps us be more healthy within the electromagnetic frequencies that we're all impacted by. So today, Bryan and Anna Maria Clement are going to answer all of your questions. So we want you to engage. This is a small group. You have a chance to really ask a lot of intense questions and get to know everything that Hippocrates is about. If you're ever interested in Hippocrates, please come see me. We also have a very special lady here who's going to share a little bit about her story. Today's topic is about living in a stressed world. Fear creates disease. Love heals all. Bryan is going to take it home. It's going to be a great evening and enlightenment. So ask all the questions that you'd like. We'll also have a book signing afterwards. Thank you all for coming. For now, I'd like to open up with, shall we start with Amanda? And tell us about a little bit about what it was like to be stressed out. Were you ever stressed out in your life?
Never.
Oh, none of us were stressed out, right?
Thank you all for coming. Oh, sorry. Oh, I have to hold this. Sorry. Thanks for coming. I'm going to very quickly kind of go through my story and kind of how I ended up here and why I do what I do today. So at 29, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I was told I had the BRCA1 gene and was really rushed through the medical system and told that if I didn't do what the doctor said to do, I was going to die. And so out of fear, out of stress, out of not knowing any different and being bullied, as I call it now, I started chemotherapy. But I knew I'm someone that's really passionate about advocating for myself and researching and finding out things. I knew if I, cut my skin, it could heal. So I got my brain thinking, and this is 10 and a half years ago when there wasn't a lot of talks like this around. What could my body do? So I came across an event that Bryan was speaking at and learned about Hippocrates. And I learned from other amazing other practitioners that were talking about no sugar, reducing all your animal products, your dairy, doing plant-based. And so what happened for me was I started applying those into my life. I was the girl that walked into the chemo room with the green juice as they're passing out sugar cookies. People now say to me, during my chemo and during my cancer journey, I had this strong mindset of a warrior. I knew in my heart and soul and truly believed it that I would not be one of the statistics that was going to die of cancer. And that got me through each day. And people kept asking me, how were you so strong? Where did this come from? And then as I kind of went through the journey and did more soul searching and really dug down to some of the emotional stuff. So the crazy thing is, all of this stressful stuff that I went through, I also went through, I was told I would never have children again because I was going to have chemotherapy and all of that. I'm a social worker as my background. Never once was I offered counseling. Never once was I told, hey, you should go see someone. Now I also thought, because social work, I'm like, I got it together. I've talked to some of my friends that are therapists as well. But I did go see some therapists, and I really got in touch with what was going on and why I gave myself cancer. And people look at me and say, Kate, that's crazy. You didn't give yourself cancer. I'm like, no, I did. I mean, I have the BRCA1 gene, sure. But I was stressed out. And the only thing, so doctors, the only reason why I got cancer was the genetic disposition. I was healthy. I was an athlete. I wasn't overweight, ate fairly healthy. But my job had me removing children from people's homes, working with severely abused children and some of the worst children in our societies. And then on top of that, when I kind of moved and changed jobs, I was working straight night shifts. We know what lack of sleep does, and all of that to your brain, your melatonin. But I didn't feel stressed. My cortisol levels and my fight and flight was always up here. And then my stress relief was running, was exercise. And I had a very smart doctor say to me, stop running. I was the one doing chemotherapy, running 5K still. I was, in the beginning I was running 10K, middle I was running 5. I ended up kind of walking 4 and running 1 at the end. And so I now kind of look at it and say, that's stress. My doctor said, go do meditation, go do Qigong, go and do some yoga. I sat in my first Qigong, and the hour, I was thinking of all the things that I should be doing or could be doing in that hour. But I came out of it and felt amazing. And I thought, oh my gosh, imagine if I actually focused on doing the Qigong instead of just going, what else could I be doing? So I look at the stress and I tell people, you need to find, and Bryan will do an amazing job at talking about it, but it is a huge component. I was doing everything else right. I was eating properly. I use the essential oils to help me lower my stress levels, but my cortisol levels were still up here because I was doing nothing but exercise and still, having some emotional baggage, I'm going to call it, that was in the backside of me. And so I've worked on that stuff, but here's the key. I've worked on it, but I've just started to unpeel some of the layers. It's like that onion, right? So come with an open heart, come with kind of listening and hearing what's being said today, but also know that it's what's inside of us that's going to make a big difference in some of the changes and really kind of lowering our stress levels in this crazy world, but finding the time for yourself is so important. And that's what my passion is now, is to be able to help people do that and find ways to find that emotional balancing, because it's so huge. So that's where my story comes from, so thank you. Awesome. I think it's you up next. You get to feel like you have a microphone, but it's not really one.
Great. Well, it's so nice to be here. I'm from Sweden, so I love the buds coming out in spring. It's just wonderful to see. So, coming from Sweden, where natural health was very widely accepted. And, I started up young. When I was 15, I became vegan. And by the time I finished high school, I was ready for studying with people that was in this field. And I realized I had to hurry because they were all getting old. And so skipped college, did college while I was working. But I came to this lady that had healed herself from rheumatoid arthritis. She came from Denmark. She was sickly all her life. She was diagnosed at 14 with rheumatoid arthritis. Of course, lived on medication. Never heard a word about diet or lifestyle. Had all this stress in her life, got married young, got divorced, the husband took care of the daughter, and so there was a lot of sadness and grief in her life. And so by the time she's 50 years old, she's in Copenhagen, and she wakes up one morning, and now her whole body had stiffened, and her jaw had closed. If you know arthritis, you know, it's inflammation and then calcification, and then the body starts changing the form. So now she couldn't take the medication that kept her going and got her going for the day. So she would actually fill water in the sink and sip water through her teeth. She was lucky that a young couple had moved into her building who had just become vegetarians. And you know, when you do, it's another lifestyle. So you buy every book under the sun. And they had one book about self-help. So they looked up, what do you do with rheumatoid arthritis? Well, you need a lot of food in juice form. So juice form, of course, is the easiest way for your body to accept it. And a lot of garlic. There was a lady, a physician in Denmark. Her name was Christine Nolfi. She is actually the owner of the word Living Foods. She had breast cancer and she healed herself, and she opened a wonderful place in northern Denmark that's called Humlegarden, and it's still existing, but of course, guess what? So she opened that, started to help people the same way she had healed herself naturally, because she had no medical treatments. And they took her license away. But that didn't stop her. She kept, she kept helping lots of people. And so it's been going on for many years. Well, so when Alma healed, so she got these things from this young couple, and her whole body opened up. It took many, many months, of course. Then she started to study, went to England, went all over Europe, and came up to Sweden, and people there begged her, please open a place for people so they can heal. And there was a lot going on, but there wasn't really a place where you could go to in Stockholm. There was 50 places all over, beautiful places all over Sweden. So she did, and she had been doing that for 30 years by the time I came there. And she was about 80 years old at that time. And we worked night and day. She worked night and day. I thought that's what you do. When I met my friends on trains and buses sometimes, and they said they have 8-hour schedule, I'm like, what? Who works only 8 hours? But I was on cloud 9. I just could not believe it, how people could heal. They came in. So a lot of people, of course, with rheumatoid arthritis is in wheelchairs, or they need, a walker or something. And they are on a lot of anti-inflammatory steroids, you name it. And these steroids, guess what? They lead right to osteoporosis. So not only do you have a problem already, now you get that. So a lot of people don't even know that. They weren't even told that. So it takes a long time to get off these medications. So people used to stay with us for a long time, many, many months. I loved them so much, by the time they left, I wanted to go home with them. It was really tough, and you had to learn this, no, they're not yours. Yeah, and it's really something to learn. Because, there's an old say, if you're not with the ones you love, love the ones you're with. And that's how it's at the Institute. It's, everybody really, for you who's been at the Institute, you start taking care of other people. It doesn't matter where they come from in the world. It's just that love that is from another planet, kind of. And it is so pure. So we did a lot of work, and we actually had studies done, and we actually got government support. For a few years, we had an amazing team in the government that came around and said, okay, we want to see what you guys are doing, because, for them, we were quacks. But they realized we weren't. And we got licensed, and actually then your stay would be paid. Can you imagine? You're going to a totally alternative place where you're learning about lifestyle, and it was paid for. Yeah, so that's something we need to strive for again, because allopathic and holistic medicine has to go hand in hand. We can't just be going on like we have, and it's like we have one team here and one team here, and we have to meet. And we're all open for that, and that's why when Caroline has helped us so much with the doctor days, and you should see, they are so surprised. They are bewildered what's going on, because many of them thought we were quacks, and then it's like opening up their eyes, like it's this lifestyle. When you exercise, don't you get happy? you take a good walk, it makes you happy. And Finland actually found in a study that the ones that have strong muscles have strong mentality too. So here, let's go to the gym and lift some weights. Not to become Mr. or Mrs. Universe, but just to feed. Realize that every muscle is connected to an organ. So for example, when you do biceps and triceps, that's you feeding your lungs and heart. And so on. Every muscle. That's why you're feeling good, And so Bryan and I go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. When we travel, we go every day because it's more stress on the body, and so every day we do that too. But otherwise, we do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that has worked. That's a great schedule. And you release a lot of stress at the same time. And of course, you want to do stretching, aerobic, but weight training, if I want to prevent osteoporosis, it's really only resistance that's going to help that. So everybody asks, how do I prevent osteoporosis? Well, there is no pill in the world that's going to do that. You can take some, but it's really resistant, because with resistance, now see what happens, it's so smart. With resistance on my muscles, because you actually tear your muscles, you actually make a hormone that tells your bones, you better get strong. So for example, when you have a newborn baby, let's say 8 pounds, anybody can carry 8 pounds around, but then they grow to 20 and 30 and 40, and you're still carrying them around because you now have built up that strength. So it's the same at the gym. You start very low and work up. So we have a weight loss program at the Institute, and boy, they exercise 4 hours a day. Whoa, the first couple of days, they're like, how am I going to do this? And then by the third week, because our program is 3 weeks, they don't want to leave. They are so in love with the exercise that they do and the weight that they lost. Normally, let's say, for a male, you probably lose 10 pounds a week. Female, 30 pounds a week. You go in the weight loss program, now you're moving everything up. And so most females that normally would lose maybe 10 in the 3-week program, they will lose up to 15, 20, maybe more. Depends on also if you have water weight in your body. So it's a fun program. And of course, we have also the cancer program with Dr. Jan Rannicki that blows everybody's mind who's in it. Because if I've gone to cancer, Louise Hay, if you ever heard about Louise Hay, she wrote many books. She's an esoteric visionary, and she used to come and write many books at the Institute. So she actually came and spent time writing her books. But she herself got cancer. She got colon cancer. And she kind of had to use the methods that she was teaching other people, and she had to change her attitude and find out why did she get colon cancer. And she healed herself. Once she realized what it was, she healed herself in 6 months. So, so people have an enormous need of emotional help, because sometimes we just get into a corner and we can't see the light out of the tunnel. And so you're going through something with Dr. Jan, who is a psychologist and now being a physician any minute. Can you imagine? She is up in her late 60s and she's just becoming a physician. So she leads that program. And then we have diabetes. Of course, diabetes is a no-brainer, except diabetes type 1. But diabetes type 2 is a no-brainer, because if you don't get healed in a lifestyle program with diet and exercise and sleeping, then there is something else going on, So we use a lot of supplementation that is pure, that's organic and alive. Actually, I used to put everything under microscope, even your blood, so I could see it magnified 10,000 times. And if I put these supplements under microscope, they actually are alive. So we always test that when we get a big batch too, that they are as good as we promise they will be. So when I take things that are synthetic, guess what? My body will fight it as an invader. It doesn't matter if it was a bacteria, virus, or a bad synthetic supplementation or medication. It will fight it. So it's so amazing how we're made, because you have these 100 trillion microbes called microbiome in your gut. that makes most of your serotonin, which is the happy juice. Serotonin, we can't function without serotonin. So I want to keep, if I have diarrhea, if I'm always acid reflux, if I'm constantly constipated or whatever is going on, then I'm not going to make enough serotonin. I'm not going to feel good. So stress is a big part, of course, that also can change your microbiome. But when you were born, so when you were just born, in 20 minutes, your mom's microbiome became yours. And if I was not born vaginal, if I was born like Bryan, cesarean, then the breast milk, of course, is where you got all of us got that from the milk. What if we didn't get it from the milk? Well, then there is mom and everybody else have also microbes on their skin. You know, when you have newborn babies, don't they want to suckle on your skin, all of them? Because that's an instinct to get more microbes. Because microbes is like having a bank. The more we have of healthy microbiome, the better it is. So we all have pathogens coming in. You know, even in this room, there is virus, bacteria, there is aerobic parasites. We are constantly bombarded with this. And look, if somebody sneezes right in your face, you know, you're like, okay. But that doesn't have to be like that. It's you know, you get it sooner or later. So what do we have to encounter that and take care of that is your immune system. And your immune system is looking for your participation, because it can't do anything without you. It needs oxygen. It needs food that is alive. When you cook something, you kill all the good stuff that nature gave to it. So nature gave you, in those foods, Bryan called it hope, it's easier to remember, hormones, oxygen, phytonutrients, and enzymes. And so cooked food has none of that. So when people come to the Institute and they start eating raw living food, which is a lot of sprouts, it has sunflower sprouts, pea sprouts, buckwheat sprouts, mung beans you probably heard about, broccoli sprouts, fenugreek sprouts, clover sprouts, it just goes on and on and on. The buffet is full of it. Your body starts changing. So we have blood tests when you first arrive and by the end of third week, if you stay 3 weeks. And the changes, your immune system is like, okay, I get it. Now I can do what I need to do. And the changes are amazing. And you know, Dr. Longo at USC in California, he did the research with mice and saw what happens with the immune system when you detoxify and rejuvenate. And we do it because we have a living laboratory. Our institute is really what he's doing with mice, and he's showing and proving, we're doing every day at the institute. So we have a lot of fun because we only expect success, and we are spoiled rotten, Bryan and I. I've been doing this for like 45 years, maybe more, maybe more. I'm 63, so maybe it's 48. And you know, I been lucky to live this lifestyle and see what it does to us. And there's no medication in our life, and nobody who's on this lifestyle have medication of any form. Yeah, we have a couple that we just filmed in West Palm Beach. They're 91 and 92, Cias and Alice, and they've been married about 70 years. And she came and she had cancer in her leg, and they were going to cut her leg off. And guess what? These people are professional dancers. They teach dancing. That was not going to happen. They came and she healed. And this is like 20 years or 25 years ago. So they're still teaching dancing, and you should see this couple. So with that, I let Bryan take over. Thank you. Yeah. All right, you got to put that in your pocket.
Well, how is everyone this evening? Nice to have you out here. So today we're talking about stress. And, you know, many years ago when I began my work, I thought that if I changed a person's diet they'd all get well. Because remember, I'm a nutritional scientist. And then I'd watch that people ate exactly like I told them to, and some were not getting well. And some died. And it forced me to do something I wasn't wanting to do. Acknowledge that your mind has an awful lot to do with everything. As a matter of fact, the most important thing, now in my maturity, I realize is the mind. That's why every single guest that comes to Hippocrates is gifted to see psychotherapists. Do we think you all need it? You bet your ass we do. Even if you don't think you need it, you need it. The ones who say I don't need it, they need it the most, usually. And once I began with that gifting, back in 1981, I started to see revolutionary changes in people. When you can take the burden off your back and release the sadness and the pain that often, I'm sure, even though I had an extraordinary childhood and was loved, and I never doubted I was loved by my family, there was something within me that I didn't like about me. So when I would eat a gallon of ice cream, it wasn't because I needed a gallon of ice cream, or when I overate sugar. We impose on ourselves pain. If we don't have an image of ourselves as whole, complete, happy, fulfilled, we actually impose disorder on ourselves. And it manifests into physical and emotional disorder. Now, when I look at the larger picture, I have a plague within me that I can never look at just one area of anything. I dissect everything and look at it in a global way, a universal, large way. I started to say, what are the overwhelming stresses we have today that we didn't have? Well, I talked to a friend of mine who taught for a long time at an Ivy League college psychology, and he gave me a number years ago that was stunning. He said, if you compare a woman or man from today to a woman or man from a century ago, we have 15,000 times more stress. I want you to remember that. I didn't say 15 times. I didn't say 1,500 times. I said 15,000 times more. And when I first challenged him, he had me back on my heels within about a minute. He said, no radio, no television, no cars, no planes. We were encloistered in our families. We knew our neighbors. To travel, as Anna Marie and I often joke, if we were 100, 150 years ago, if I went on a Midwestern tour, it would take 2 months. If I was lucky, I'd have a horse and a carriage, and I'd come this way. So things were wildly different. Things were organic. And the society was agrarian. They were farmers. They were close to the earth. Everything that they basically did was to support their families and survival. And neighbors literally knew one another. Even when I was a boy, neighbors knew one another and supported one another. Today, you don't know your neighbors. Your best friend is television or a screen that you carry in your hand. If you're not having enough stress in your own family life, just turn on the news. That's it. And people had none of that. They only knew what was going on. So the evil started back in the beginning of the 1800s in England, when the extreme wealthy weren't happy being extreme wealthy. What they wanted to do is become extra extreme wealthy. So they went out to the farms and convinced the farmers, who back then were making $300, $400 a year, if you come and work in my factory in the city, I will pay you $600 a year. And they became the landlords too. So the poor farmer gave up his farm, dragged his wife into the city, a place, this is an industrial town, a place like this, and pretty much put his 10 children, his wife, in a very, very small apartment, which, by the way, he probably owned and charged $200 a year for. Do you follow? So the farmer was behind the 8 ball. And for the first time in human history, listen, the first time in human history, we weren't attached to the earth. That alone was devastating to us. Most of you, to get you outside, I've got to pry you out of your comfort seat. That simple. Even I yell, walk. I notice I'm going 2 streets away, I jump in my car. It's a habitual thing that we're doing. So let's explain what happened when the Industrial Revolution began and how we've become worse ever since then. It's not something that's become better, I can assure you of that. Something that's become worse. Could you find the right clicker here? Oh, there it is. That is. The vast majority of time humans have lived on this green planet, we were nomadic in total harmony with all other life. Do you realize we didn't have stores? We didn't have payroll. We didn't have banking. That people pretty much lived off the earth. And they were walking from place to place. Then the farming began. When our intellect began to supersede our instinct, insecurity rose and we began making territorial perception happen. So all at once, it wasn't good enough that we were abundantly thriving off the earth, that we now had states and boundaries and borders and fences and to protect what we own. Remember, we own everything. And we shared everything. Now all at once, we become territorial, which puts the first major stress on us. First major stress. The rise of industrialization. Those who developed the greatest intellect became the perceived leaders of the next phase in human development. Now remember, 100, 150 years ago, not the most intellectual person, the most down-to-earth, common-sense person was revered. If you knew how to use the tool the best, plow the field the best, sew the clothes the best, that woman and that man were revered. All at once, the intellectuals, the people who were able to read, remember, hardly anyone read. Hardly anyone read. We call them illiterates, I'm not sure. Maybe we're instinctual illiterates in our society. And pretty much, they outsmarted or became what? Con artists. So they conned the rest of the culture and society. They manipulated the farmers by offering dreams of grandeur and money to work in their newly created industrial capitals. Then things got rough. As this exodus from the land drew millions into the newly created cities, governed by industrial elites, people began to question their very existence. Remember, we knew who we were, good, bad, or indifferent. If you go back 150 years and you ask a 14-year-old boy or girl, what are you going to do? They knew what they were going to do. They weren't finding themselves. There was no such thing as teenage years. Teenage years were literally created by businesses. How many of you knew that? Businesses created that to prime you to be permanent consumers. And that's where they made it hip to go to fast food joints, right? You know, when you were young, you didn't realize why you wanted to hang out at a pizza parlor. That was all imposed on your brain. Or McDonald's was hip. Or wear a certain kind of clothes, or blue jean. When I was young, before blue jeans were known to be hip, we used to buy 2 pairs for $5. Now I've seen blue jeans for $200. And they get the same blue jeans from the same place, and they stamp different names on them. And they have you buying into that stuff. And most of that was imposed upon you in those teenage years. What's the hippest? What's the right? I want to be part of. Well, people didn't ask what they were part of 100 years ago. They were part of the earth. They were farming. They were going to have children. Family was important. No. None of that was ever questioned. You know, you had some, every once in a while, you have an abominable personality that may have been insane that didn't fit that mold. And that was a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. Everyone else went along with, now what we all admire is a pretty good program at that point. Things that we all long for. So these poor people got lost and pissed off. For the first time in human history, we left our roots and became isolated and awkward, propelling further dissolution of our instinctual spirits. So now I'm talking to 80-year-olds in my office all of the time who are trying to find themselves. And your whole life you're trying to find yourself, you're never there. If you're never there, you're never well. If you don't have a sense of security, a sense of comfort, a sense of purpose, a sense of values, you are going to get sick, because the universe, in combination with you, will impose physical or emotional disorder on you. To literally say to you, what's up? You got to get your act together. The birth of corporations wasn't enough. They had thousands of people in factories. They were making obscene amounts of money. They said, oh no, we're going to create corporations that, by the way, are people. You don't know about corporations. They're people you can't sue. They're people who are protected. So corporations actually superseded the Industrial Revolution, which was even worse. Now they had so much money, they had to start educating average people. Nobody got an education that wasn't part of the upper echelon before. It was impossible. And women, by the way, would go to Wellesley, one of the best schools on the planet, in the 1940s as a finishing school. I didn't say 1840s, 1740s. Women in the 1940s were considered unable to be educated. So even Wellesley, one of the best schools for women, top 5 schools on the planet, it was a finishing school 70 years ago, 80 years ago. Think about this. God forbid if you were of color, had to create their own schools. God forbid if you were a Jew, so the list goes on. But they had so much money, they had to allow a few of what we call the underclass at that point, they actually call them the underclass, to get educated so they could count their money and work in their offices. That's a fact. It's like, when I started to look at this, I said, wow, this has been a really weird plan, hasn't it been? And the whole time they tell you how good you have it. Notice what the politicians tell you. Have it good. The economy's great. For who? White guys like me. Industries morphed into corporations and began global outreach, gathering the innocent flock into their sinister plots, really, what they were. Now they had so many people in this so-called burgeoning middle class, which is going away at this point. So many people in that middle class, and they were longing so much for a little bit of nature, they created suburbs. There was no such thing as suburbs before. There were farms and there were cities. So they said, well, give them a little plot. In their windowsill, they can grow flowers so that the women aren't going to go completely out of their mind with the 10 children running around a stamp apartment this size. And so the first big ones were places like Levittown. How many of you ever remember Levittown? That was in the New York area. And every house looked the same. The difference was you may paint a different shade on your house, a different color in your house. And they put everyone there and they pacified everyone because there was revolts going on at that point. Because people started to say, wait a minute, I'm working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. And by the way, in those days they were working 12-year-old girls and boys the same way. And they said, well, we can't handle this stuff. So they gave them suburbs and slowed all of you down. Now you have different levels of suburbs. We drive through them here in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, and we have them in Florida. The neighborhoods, we say. Oh, this is a nice neighborhood. That's a nice way of saying what? That's where the money is. It's a not so nice neighborhood. What does that mean? No money. That's it. Someday I'd like to be in that neighborhood. So they give you this pecking order of the middle, which is practically erased out of our culture at this point. So as generations passed, people became more comfortable living in confined entrapments, believing that someday they could attain the economic success and comfort that the corporation leaders dangled in front of their eyes daily. Now that used to be one generation ago 20% of the population. Today it is 1% of the population. So in 25 years, we've gone from 20% of the population having the money to 1%. How many of you know that 3 families in America, listen closely, 3 families have more money than 80% of the population? There's nothing I tell you that's not factual, by the way. Now, you're not going to hear this on Fox News, I'm going to tell you. These corporations became islands unto themselves that have successfully entrenched themselves in governmental control in the entirety of the developed world. So we all claim we have a democracy. Oh, yeah? Well, when America stopped being an America was the day the Supreme Court years ago voted you could spend as much money in elections as you want. That was the end of America. That one vote, that one day. Because you're not the one that can give $20 million and $100 million to a campaign. Who are the ones that can? Now, do you think they're just so generous and so kind and so patriotic that they just give $100 million and don't want anything from it? So if this nice lady here was evil and she gave me $100 million and I was just senator here from Ohio, what do you think she would say to me as she was giving me a $100 million check? Here's what I want to have happen.
Right, exactly.
So who runs your country completely? They came out of the closet. They don't even hide it this way. And by the way, I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican. You need these people. You don't have these people, man, you're a goner. You're a goner. No way. And 85% of who has the most money wins the elections. That's the statistics, so you know. So whoever has the most money, 85% of them. It's an oddity if the woman or man with the most money doesn't win. And so you're thinking, well, I'm just happy I have this flower box in my window. I can take a vacation for a week every other year. Now, to top the other thing off, when I was young, the odd thing is that one income, the family could have the mother at home if she wanted to be, who raised the children. I was blessed by God. My mother was home, she raised me. And I was a hell raiser, so thank God she was there. Because I would have either killed somebody or died myself by the time I was breaking windows, running around, causing shit all the time. So thank God mother was there. Today, can't happen. If a woman and man does not work, they cannot survive. I'm not talking about thrive. The average American, if you don't both work. Now, I'm not here to make a commentary on women, but I'll give you a fact. About 15 years ago, the woman that was graduating the top of her class out of Yale, Phi Beta Kappa, top, was walking out, and her generation at that point, walking out to make an average of $125,000 with a graduate level degree. Went around and said, you know, I really want to have children. I wonder if other women feel like this. So go to the top graduates at the top schools in Europe and the United States, and 65% of them said, if we had a choice, we would be mothers. But the society imposes upon you this. Now let me tell you how that happened. I was out there actually running around in the 60s saying women should have their rights. We were being manipulated. I didn't realize it. We were being manipulated. I just got this 20 years. I'm pretty slow. Got this 20 years ago. So what happened in the 1940s? We were forced to have women work everywhere because the men were out feeding the industrial military complex. They were making their money that way, having the boys die for them. And so what happened is the women were forced. Now, I read what was written about women. The economy is going to fail. They are emotionally, that was the big one, emotionally and intellectually challenged. They're unable to do the same thing men did. 1950s come, they evaluated it was better than when men did it. So 1950s, they say, holy shit, we were completely wrong. The industries worked better. And I know this is why I surround myself with smart women, starting with my wife. Everything was working better. So they said, God, do you realize we could double the economy of the world? Double it, if in fact we could get women to work in the workplace? But women, other than really poor women, didn't ever work in the workplace because they were able to be mothers and homemakers and do the things that are so important for all of our lives. My generation comes, the opportunity. La la la, da 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 da. I watched Madison Avenue after the fact. They would dress women like me, put them in Humphrey Bogart hats, and have a cigarette. I won't say what it looked like, but you can imagine. And they were smoking it, and over their head they said, "You've come a long way, baby." So the image they gave my generation was, you want to have power, you want to be in control, you got to act like a man. Not ask for your own power. And women and I and everyone else fell right into the trap. Women didn't ask for the right thing. And so you got the wrong thing. And they told you, well, you got to act like a man. No, you should have asked, and now we should ask, can I act like a woman and get respect for that? I don't want more men. Look what we've done. When you need extra ones of us? I think not at this point. So here are some of the kingpins in this whole thing. And we're going to give them, these are the top money-making schemes in the world, corporations. Let's give them a hand, because these people screw you on a daily basis. So here it is, the oil, coal, and natural gas. Natural gas, which you have here, is just beautiful. They use 5 known carcinogenic chemicals to crack the ground. That, by the way, I have a friend who's a brain surgeon in Pittsburgh, and he said, we've doubled the amount of brain cancer since they started to frack. In Oklahoma, the boy they had to throw out that was robbing all the money, what was that guy? They put in some kind of a department there recently. He was the Attorney General of Oklahoma. Basically, the day that he forced a vote in the legislature of Oklahoma, they had a report on the desk of every one of the politicians that said it caused 7,000 earthquakes a year in Oklahoma from the fracking. But let's give them a hand. They make about 700 billion to 1 trillion a year. Let's give them a hand. And by the way, you're completely dependent upon them. How many are going to get out of here and walk home tonight? You hear what I'm telling you? And by the way, some of you are here wearing polyester clothes made out of oil. Made out of oil. Some of you are going to go home and get polyester sheets made out of oil. Plastic made out of oil. Most of this room is made out of oil. Another great group, the what? War industry. Let's give them a hand. You notice they don't send their kids. They send your kids. Yeah, they always, and you know, it's patriotism for you, but not for them. Not for them. Real patriots say no. And by the way, if you start to say no, you're not a patriot in America anymore. If you get on your knee and ask for your rights, you're not a patriot anymore. Well, I think the opposite. I happen to know what an American is. I know what this country should be. And I know whatever your opinion is should be heard. I may not agree with you. I don't agree with Howard Stern, but I thank God Howard Stern's on the radio. That's what I... The pharmaceuticals, let's give them a hand. They've done the most brilliant job in this country of anywhere in the world. We only have 4% of the population of the world. We take 50% of the pharmaceutical drugs. We are number one. Give yourself a hand. 4% of the population. Every drug that's made in the world, we consume 50%. Guys my age, on average of 5 medicines. Some take 10, some take 2, average of 5. Only 2% of 70-year-old people do not take pharmaceutical drugs, of which almost all of them are immigrants. Just like breastfeeding. Less than 5% of women breastfeed the needed 2 years, and 3.5% of them are immigrants to this country. Native-born Americans, 1.5%. Because the pharmaceuticals convince you, God didn't make breast milk for babies. It made it for men to look at. Now, I agree. I happen to like it, but that's not what it's for. This group here, I've been fighting with them my whole life since I was a boy. What I see them do on a daily basis is criminal activity. When people get involved with these people, they're worse off almost every case. Now, does that mean I'm adamantly against them all the time? No. There's times and places for medicine, period. But there's rare times and places for medicine. It's not the first choice, the only choice, and lifelong choice. And they've convinced you, now you're all crazy. The number one drug sold in the world now is antidepressants. What, we all became crazy at once? No, we're stressed. You're unhappy. You're unfulfilled. So rather than, because most of you are nice people, of course you're from Ohio. So you don't go on the street and buy dope. You go to a well-dressed guy like me with a stethoscope and you buy dope. And that's why 80% of heroin addicts start at a doctor's office in America. When I was a kid, my little Irish Catholic grandfather, Dan Daly, I grew up in the New York area. He would drive me into the Bowery. And my grandfather talked like this. And he'd drive me, the Bowery was the only place people lived on the street in America then. So you know that. Even Watts, they didn't do that. Chicago, they did. The only place people lived on the street in America was in, because they were drug addicts and alcoholics. And he'd roll down the window, and he said, "Look at that kid. If you don't get an education, you're going to end up here." Shit, I was scared. I said, "Shit, I don't want to live on these cold streets where it's freezing." Yeah, you better get an education. He started 12 putting rails down. That's what his generation did. Then we get to the red meat and poultry industry, another great group. They have you all convinced, good protein. Whoa, you need that protein. Yeah? This is completely the number one reason most of us are physically sick. You're eating chicken. You're eating eggs. You're eating fish. You're eating pork. You're eating red meat. And you have all the experts. Boy, they love these experts. Dr. Atkins and the paleo people. Half-wits that are telling you, you can't survive without it. Well, you're looking at a guy for 50 years hasn't touched any of that. Hasn't touched it. Raised 4 kids. Put hundreds of thousands of people on this and done clinical research watching people recover. And we just don't age the way the rest of you do. So you may think I'm wrong, but I'm not. That's simple. You want me to be wrong because you just want to go along with your program there. Come on, just a little bit of free-range chicken. Bullshit. There's no such thing. No such thing. I wrote a whole book on that called Poison Poultry. Well, fish. I heard fish is good for you. Read my book, Killer Fish. A little bit of dairy, organic dairy. Read my book, Dairy Deception. Supplements. 91% of supplements are dangerous to take. I'm not saying they're not what they tell you. They're dangerous to take. They'll weaken you. I wrote a book on that. On clothing, Anna Marie and I wrote a book. We just finished a book last week on menopause. I'm telling you why the world's so screwed up. We start menopause at 25 years old. We're pissed off and angry. Angry white boys. But we don't admit. You know why we wrote that book? 90% of men didn't admit or know they had menopause. Because we're men. That's what happens. That was me. If this guy had long hair down to here and a beard, that would have been me. Now, most of us say, that's really gross. But isn't that something you've seen or been part of your whole life? Sure. I used to lay in bed and eat all the time. And they realize this so well that we're so fat and so out of shape, they started to put drive-thrus at the fast food joint. You can't get your fat ass out of the car anymore. You buy that shit, you've got to just drive right through. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Then they say, well, shit, now they're sick, and they can't walk out to the pharmacy, so they have drive-through pharmacies. Now, about 10 years ago at the Institute, I was laughing. I said, next they're going to have drive-through mortuaries. A guy from Arizona stood up and said, we do. I said, you're shitting me. I looked it up. It's true. I said, no, for people who can't afford the ambulance, you drive your loved one and drop them off. I'm telling you, man, this stuff is insane. It's one-stop shopping. Unbelievable. The recipe for disaster. So we're upset, we're confused, we're out of touch, we're unfulfilled. So we're good people. We don't take dope, we take food. That was my drug of choice. So why I was a big fat guy, smoking cigarettes, smoking grass, and weighed like this, is because I didn't like who I was. So I ate, and I ate, and I ate. And now we have the data. In my book, Sweet Disease, I tell you that sugar, including fruit sugar, is 30 times more addictive than cocaine. You say, Bryan, this couldn't be true. There's nothing I'm telling you that's not true. You know what I'm telling you is true. Every bit of this, just people don't put it together and present it. Fruit sugar, white sugar, sucrose, dextrose, 30 times more addictive than cocaine. I never took cocaine, but I can tell you something. It must be pretty damn addictive. Because that whole 70s, half the people I knew were out of their mind. So this is nasty stuff. 80% of heroin addicts start at a doctor's office. And it used to be the poor people, the underclass sitting in the ghettos over in New York. Now it's the white folks from the suburbs in the same, because they have better doctors there who write better prescriptions, nicer suits. So here's the trend of obesity. 1985 to a guy my age seems like yesterday. That's all I can tell you. I don't know what happened since 1968, to be honest with you. In 1985. Look at how few people. Now, this is where there was no data on obesity. That's how little obesity was in 1985 in most of the states. The light blue was 10%. And look at those states. The really bad states were, again, the states with people who worked in blue-collar situations and were least educated. Look at that. Now, watch what happens. (1986). 1987. Notice more blue, less white. 1988. Only 7 or 8 states white now. 89. More dark blue. 1990. 3 states left, 4 states left. 91, 3 states left. They're skiing their ass off in Colorado. They're still skinny. 2 states left, 92. Bill Clinton. Feel my pain. 1 state left. They're skiing. Look at them. 93. It's gone. 94 now. Every year, heavier and heavier and heavier. Notice the dark blue starting to seep the country now. More unhappy people, more drugs. Look at by 86. 87, we have a new color, over 20%. Obese, morbidly obese. Your state's right in there. Look at that. Next year, Alaska went down. They can see Russia from there. Look at that now. 1/3 of the country by 99. Look at this, the new century, 2000. 40% of the country, over 20%. There we have a new one, red, 25%. No light blues left anymore, 3 red states, 2002. 4 red states, 3. Dark blues heading out. Look at that red now, 2004. 1/3 of the country. Now we have a new color in 3 states, 30% the next year. Hawaii's holding out there. Look at that. They're doing hula dancing. The whole southern block here. Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee. 5 states now. Whole South. Gone. 2010. Nikita Khrushchev said to Jack Kennedy, "Don't worry about us bombing you. You're going to kill yourself from inside." Let's clap for ourselves. We are number one. We really have done a great job in destroying yourself. And my good friend Dick Gregory, I miss him, he died a year ago, said to me a long time ago, they took the chains off, gave us the food, the chains were better. I believe it. But now they didn't only put them on some folks, they put them on all folks. I'm coming off a stage a number of years ago. The former head of the FDA was coming off. He said to me, "My work now is with childhood obesity." I started to like him. He said, as I'm walking on to speak to hundreds of doctors, do you realize every single food company now intentionally puts synthetic opiates in their food? The sugar wasn't enough to get you addicted. Every major food company internationally puts synthetic dope, opiates, in your food to get you, your children, your family addicted to it. Challenge anything I ever say. I'd love you to do it. Next time, bring your intellectuals here. Bring your professors here. Let's have a panel. Let's have a discussion. And I'll back their ass down. And I'm going to tell you, we're in trouble, people. We're lost. We're being led by the nose. We're getting sicker. They're not even trying to help you now with that illness. Our babies are dying. We have them on Prozacs. We have them on Ritalin. No such thing as ADD. We made it up. No such thing as restless leg. We made it up. No such thing as auto reflux. We made it up. Now we're giving pre-diabetic medicine. We know you're going to be a diabetic, so now we're going to give you pre-medicine. You better wake the hell up. You're gone. You're gone. And if we don't radically shift, it's not about, oh, let's not be extreme. Let's be radically extreme. Let's go back and say no to practically everything that you and I have been sucked into believing is normal. It's not normal. We are, and we're not alone, in the United States, 35% are obese, and by the year 2030, we anticipate 42%. Obese. Britain approximates the same statistics, and all leading economies are following suit. In the next 5 weeks, I'll be in 12 countries lecturing. I used to go to France. I didn't see anything but skinny people in France. Italy. I was shocked. I grew up with a lot of Italians where I grew up. I never saw a fat Italian in Italy. Now they're all getting fat. Everyone's getting fat. We exported fast food. Where Anna Marie grew up, when I first went over there in the 70s, early 70s, they didn't have television. They'd watch television 2 hours a day. Now they have the same 800 channels you have, if you want. And what do you think they do? They have you spin right into that stuff. Now you notice they have a lot of doctor shows on. Oh, Dr. Oz. We're going to be with Dr. Oz next week. Dr. Oz. The cute doctors. What's that? The doctor show. Oh, look at those hunky doctors. Let's listen to what they have to say. They're pushing dope. That's what they're doing. They're pushing dope. So now they have 30-minute and 1-hour infomercials to tell you to take drugs. And what the hell is this with the food channels? Oh, none of you watch that nonsense. Wasn't bad enough we have one 24-hour food channel. Now we have two, where people chop up meat. That's all they do. Chop up meat and fry it all day long, and you watch it and think that's interesting? If that doesn't show you're a food addict, you're out of your mind. Something's wrong with that shit. I'm telling you right now. Anna Marie says the same, no matter what the name of the chef is, what she or he looks like, they all do the same thing. Chop up the meat, fry the meat, throw a few vegetables on that. And we write books on that, and everyone buys it. The most popular books in the world are food recipe books, because we're flaming addicts. Obesity has become a global epidemic. Look at this. Japan is the least. United States is the top. Mexico superseded us. They just beat us, by the way. England, right in the same neighborhood. England at least has enough compassion for their citizens to do a study. They were really worried about their children being obese. In the United States, 72% of our children are overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. You think you're sick? You wait. Wait till the twilight of this story. 72% of our kids are overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. You think we have cancer? You think we have diabetes? Diabetes, when I was a kid, they used to call it adult onset diabetes. You didn't get it till 50, 60 years old. Bad living 50 years. You know, 2/3 of the kids, or 2/3 of the people getting adult onset diabetes are kids below 18. 5-year-old kids. Soda. The British Journal of Medicine, the #1 dietary cause is soda causing that. And sitting on your ass looking at a cell phone. Our poor mothers were out with flashlights searching for us at night because we didn't come home. I know where my kids are, and my kids grew up in an incredibly healthy household. They're in front of what? A computer. Which, by the way, has advertisement on it too. Disillusionment breeds addiction. Lost and feeling estranged from success, people began consuming toxic non-foods like narcotics. Period. That's your story. That's my story. And you go to most health stores, it's just bullshit. It's the same products, they charge you twice as much and throw organic on the side of it. So you feel justified. Just like all the yuppies walking around. I'm eating organic eggs, organic meats, organic bread. It's nonsense. This stuff is complete nonsense. If you took a farmer, they weren't organic, took a farmer from 100 years ago and said, look at what people are spending outrageous amounts of money for because, by the way, they don't want to have chemicals on their food. The farmer would say to you, what do you mean? You're allowing them to put chemicals on the food? My grandfather, Dan Daly, would have popped you in the mouth if you put chemicals on his food. They had common sense. You think, Ohio State University did the research, so of course, although it kills bugs and it kills animals, it mustn't hurt us in any way. Now, who the hell do you think pays Ohio State to do that nonsense research? Who do you think funds these universities? Harvard included? Don't think it's Ohio State. It's Harvard, it's Stanford. The biggest bums in the story are the Ivy League schools, because everyone aspires, the people with the deep pockets. I don't want Ohio State to do my research. I want Stanford to do my research. I want Princeton to do my research. I want Princeton to say that opiate-saturated food is perfectly fine. Now they genetically modify the food. Look at Dr. Seneff out of MIT, came out of the closet. Dr. Seneff 6 years ago, top professor at MIT. If you're a professor at MIT, most likely you have a Nobel laureate. That's 6 times more Nobel laureates teaching at MIT than any school on the planet Earth. She's the one that reads the research before they permit them to publish it. And she comes out and says, the #1 cause of autism happens to be high fructose corn syrup. Yes, vaccines do it. And how many of you know your rights were just taken away in the last month in America? Because on the internet, they can no longer go against vaccines. They've just made a rule they cannot challenge vaccines on the internet. You ever hear of the Nazis? Well, we have them. They're called the corporate Nazis. It's one of the wealthiest corporations called the Pharmacueticals, who have half of you taking half the drugs. Have many of you on antidepressants because you're a little unhappy. Grow the hell up. This is what's going on in your country. And we're all sitting back, relaxed, eating organic cookies. I'll never forget the first cookies in a health store I saw 45 years ago. I was shocked. I ate them, but they were licensed by God. Now you go in, there's a whole aisle of chips and cookies. They give you so many choices you don't buy anything. So holy shit, I'm overwhelmed, And they have hip names on them, like chickpea, deep fried chickpeas, You get what I'm saying? They got you. Look at this guy. The power of thought. To recap, negative thoughts and fear will strip your power, making you an easy target for seduction by the nefarious forces we've just discussed. This is not uncommon. Dick Gregory calls me up in Boston, what was it, 35, 40 years ago, and said, we're going to take care of some fat people. So I thought fat people like I was, 300-pound people. First guy he finds is 1,100 pounds. And Dick was nuts. I loved him. He was a genius. And he said, I got an 1,100-pound guy. I said, are you on drugs? 1,100, there's no 1,100-pound. He found an 1,100-pound guy. This poor kid was 23 years old. He hadn't come out of the apartment in New York City. When they brought him out, they had to knock the frame off the door. We shipped him down. Dick made this wonderful deal with the Bahamas. It was called the Bahamian diet. Some of you may remember. You remember that, the Bahamian diet? So we put him on Eastern Airline. They made us buy 3 seats. They brought him through the cargo part. And I had to send the guy down, and the guy's entire job was make sure he couldn't walk. Buoyancy, he was in the ocean 6 hours a day walking. I watched this guy. He went down to 300 pounds. But the one problem, we didn't send psychologists down there. Went back to New York, got to 700 pounds, died, was poor, so we had to put him in a Steinway piano wooden box to bury him. That's what happens when you're unhappy, man. And some people are unhappy the other way. You just show the world how skinny you are. I just hate myself, so you become anorexic or bulimic. So we use food. I did it with fat. Some people do it with skinny. But we're not using food for substance anymore. We're using food to hide our pain. That's what we're doing. I don't care if it's health food or not. You're just spending more money for the same stuff. Now here's a guy that did something that's impossible, but that's what happens when your mind works the way it should be. The power of thought. Power of positive thought transcends matter and provides endless energy. This is to illustrate that Shermoy as he bench pressed one of his highest weights of 1,000 pounds. So I was just saying yesterday in Indianapolis, the strongest man that ever went to the Olympics is on the Hippocrates diet. He lifted 650 pounds over his head. This guy never went to the Olympics. But watch this. One hand, 7,063 pounds. See, that's impossible, Bryan. This is documented. So when we say the power of the mind, who came up with that term? How many of you are old enough to remember that? Norman Vincent Peale. He was the first guy. He was Anthony Robbins of the 1930s. Do you follow me? He said, you can do anything you want to do. Get your head together. I believe that. How many of you know the story about the little 95-pound mother that was on the beach in Long Island, New York, and a sick shark was coming, she thought, towards her toddler who was wading in the water? She went and grabbed the shark, ran in, lifted the shark over her head, swung it, and threw it 20 feet onto the shore. That's what happens when you're in tense state. How many of you have seen where people get crushed under a car or a boulder? Somebody goes and picks it up. But most of you don't put focused effort in your life. Everyone I've seen, thousands of people I've seen heal diseases, like this lady. It's your head. No, it's your head. You can't eat hot dogs and take, coffee implants. But you pull your head together and give yourself the right fuel, and you're going to heal. If you're analytical, you're going to die. You're thinking too much. Forget thinking, do it. I always taught my kids, you have to know enough to run in the right direction. But don't wait to know everything. You're never going to run. Just go for it. People are afraid of failure. Be more afraid of not living. Most of you are afraid to die because you've never lived. Martin Luther King predicted his death. Jesus Christ, 33, on the cross. So this is it. He did his thing. Are you ready to die? No, because you haven't lived. You're in there eating that shit. His all-time record was when he achieved a whopping 7,000 pounds with one arm lift. I said, Bryan, this is impossible. Bryan must be making this up. Bryan doesn't make anything up. Bryan just shows you stuff you don't see on the news. Bryan shows you stuff that I've lived every single day of my life for half a century. I see people come to us in 3 weeks, major tumors, 3-pound tumors, 4-pound tumors are gone. That's spontaneous remission. How often does it happen? 3, 5, 6 times a year at Hippocrates. That's impossible biologically to happen. But what I tell you, 100% had a major emotional shift. A major emotional shift. Boom, I'm done. I can't be sick anymore. They were afraid of dying. And fear is a good impetus sometimes, by the way. Fear is not always bad. Cars coming at you, you better have some fear. So I just talked about David Kessler. Read his book, The End of Overeating. It will stun you. He dropped out of the FDA because he knew it was so corrupt. He was corrupt when he was there. He said, I couldn't do it anymore. I quit. Chemical flavorings are another essential weapon in the arsenal of the food industry. The term is used to describe this criminal practice as hyperpalatability. 1 or 2 major scientific conferences globally a year are held where chemists get together and find more inventive ways to get you addicted to their foods. He said, isn't this illegal? I said that to him. He said, no. He said, if they find out that this synthetic opiate is bad, they have another 3 or 4 or 5 formulas on the way. You're not going to be able to stop these people unless you stop eating the nonsense. I'll take you to a good health store. Not good, that's bad. But a health store and show you high fructose corn syrup and a lot of this stuff. Sugar in it. Now they call it organic cane sugar. What the hell's that shit? It's sugar. Look what he said, Kessler. Kessler, when meeting with award-winning chef Puck, asked him why he thought consumers were overeating. Sugars, fat, and salt. People can't get enough. Every chef in the world knows. You take that nonsense that you're cooking, everyone cooks the same thing, just puts it on the plate different ways. You put sugar, salt in there, people eat it. Why do they put sugar in baby food? The mother's addicted. And now the mother gets her child addicted. First dope pusher you ever met were your mother and father. You were good, they gave you dope. You were bad, they pulled the dope away. What do you think that trained you to do? Now you're lonely, you're sad, you're unhappy, what are you doing? Today, people's fear-driven consumption is accelerated by the international addiction brought forth by manipulation of food. How many of you read this book, Spark? Ratte, professor of psychology at Harvard, revolutionized our understanding of the maladies caused by sedentary lifestyle in his landmark work, Spark. Beautiful book. He shows you that there is an essential need for movement and exercise for the brain to function. So he's the psychologist at Harvard that basically said, this is it. You don't use your body. We have observed, not in a scientific fashion, but an absolute factual fashion, that 50% of the people that have depression, we're talking light to moderate, not bipolar, if you exercise, it goes away. 50%. You just have to exercise. And that's why older people get pissed, because they're sitting around, they're not moving, they're out of yesterday it was funny, I'm at the gym, it was 2 days ago in Chicago, and there was a guy exactly my age, and he was against the wall putting his pants on. And I laughed, and I said, how old are you? And he said, I'm 69 years old. I said, oh. I said, do you realize from the time we're 50, the average person, 50 to 51 becomes 1% more feeble. 50 to 60, 10%. 70, 20%. 80, 30, we become more feeble. And I laughed. I said, when I was a kid, I would sort of hold my underpants up and jump in them. Now I'm over there like this. You notice that? Now, you can slow it down, but we're all going to get older. We're all going to eventually die, but don't we want to do it on our own term? You're eating this nonsense and not moving, you're in trouble. A recent revolutionary fitness program allowed a school district in the U.S. with 19,000 children to elevate itself as #1 in the world in science. Now listen to this. This is an amazing study. It was, I think, here in Indiana, wasn't it? I forget. But it was this whole school district, a section of school, 19,000 kids. They were the worst school in math and science in America. So they fired the superintendent of the school, rightfully, and they looked and they said, well, it must be bad books, it must be bad teachers. All of that was good. Teachers were above average, national average. All the books were new books. The facilities were in great part good. So they get a new superintendent. He happens to be a fitness buff. He said, okay, there's no fitness in any of these programs. When I was a kid, you'd run around 2 hours a day in school. Now first 2 things they take out is fitness and art. The only example that we possibly could be civilized. They take that out, okay. He says 3 hours a day or the kid fails. 5 days a week, 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week. And even when they had holidays, he brought them in. They got better grades if they did fitness in that. One school year. They beat the Japanese, they beat the Chinese, and the only thing they changed is what? How many of you exercise on a regular basis here now? Not their food, their exercise. You didn't change their food. You change the food and the exercise, man, you're on a different planet then. Women who consistently exercise reduce their chance of developing dementia by 50%. How come I'm telling you that? How come the national television doesn't tell you that? How come doctors don't tell you that? That's an overwhelming statistic. You don't want to lose your memory, you better exercise. I'm not talking about 5%, I'm talking about half the women that get dementia. If they exercise, they wouldn't get dementia. This evidence is incontrovertible. Aerobic exercise optimizes our brain for peak performance. Engaging brains promote the leading role of dopamine and norepinephrine in regulating the attention system. This is the broad scientific explanation of how exercise defeats ADD. Because there's no such thing as ADHD or ADD. It's sedentary brains and overdosing on dope food. And what kid doesn't have dope food called sugar constantly? The average American child consumes double their weight in sugar a year. A 12-year-old who weighs 100 pounds consumes 200 pounds of sugar a year. And we think everything's fine. You go to the doctor. You said it well. You go to the oncology ward at a major hospital, and they're giving out candy and cookies. I mean, look at the shit they feed you in a hospital. It's to keep you in there longer, I'm sure. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And nobody questions this stuff. Why? Because most of you, it's a step up when you go to a hospital and eat that nonsense. Because you're eating out of Domino's Pizza. You're eating McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King. You know, it's unbelievable. This is a book Anna Marie and I wrote on sex. Everyone says, oh, I'm getting old and sex. If you're not loving sex until the day you die, something's wrong in that picture. In Asia, 85, 9-year-old people, almost all of them are making love. Here, 40-year-old boys, 50% cannot sexually perform. Well, no wonder. 72% of our children are obese, morbidly obese, or overweight. Now, what we know is when blood flow stops going to the brain, it doesn't work. Stops going to the heart, it doesn't work. Stops going to the genitalia, it doesn't work. So the same thing we do to get rid of heart problems, we do to get rid of sex problems and brain problems. Same exact thing. And by the way, not only eating a good food and moving, but we give you nitric oxide. Nitric oxide won the Nobel Prize in 1996. They don't want to know you about it. But by the way, if you took nitric oxide, which your body produces till you're 25, 26, even if you ate a bad diet, you probably wouldn't have a heart attack and stroke. You eat a good diet, you'll never have a heart attack and stroke. I'll make a $10 million bet, and I'll win that one on. But they don't want you to know these things. So our book, 7 Keys to Lifelong Sexual Vitality, we highlight the reality that our primary driving force is procreation. Now, you say, well, that is when we're young. No. When you have a 100-year-old mother at home, and the family's coming to pick her up, and she's in the mirror, fixing her hair and putting her dress on. That's sex hormones that do that. Dramatically different than when you're 40, but the reality is, it's not a dirty thing to want to make love. It's a weird thing to be suppressed from doing that. So, why I wrote that book, how many of you were brought up Catholic here? They did a number on me. They used to actually, when I was a kid, I didn't know what sex was, but I knew I wanted it once they said it was bad. What were they talking about there? This is a funny story. So the older boys, 3 years older, they never had sex, but they acted like they did. So I heard the word. They talked about sperm, but I didn't get it right. I thought it was firm. Now, in the Catholic faith, you have to go to the priest who's a channel to God, and you go in a confessional. So I think they don't see me. So I said, because I was really ripping up the priest, I said to the priest, I put firm in a girl. And he said, young man, do you mean sperm? That whole year, they wouldn't let me walk home with the kids. I had to wait 10 minutes later. I'm such an idiot. Like, he's not going to come out. Came out and grabbed me by the back of the collar. Where Anna Maria grew up it's not sexually promiscuous in Sweden, but it's the only country in the world that has close to equality. Like their paternity leave, half the time men take it. Not like here, if we ever had it, which we don't have, by the way, 95% of the people would be women. The only man that would do it if the woman was sick or something. There, 50, I see it. I go to the gym when I'm in Sweden. I'll be there in a month, and the guys are in there with the babies changing their thing. It's nice to see. There's no difference in the salary they make in Sweden between a male or a female. Now, it's far from perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect. But she didn't grow up thinking she was second-rate citizen. She talks back all the time. I learned to listen after 37 years. When this essential force is not nourished, we further plummet into despair. So the big menopause issue is guys start not to feel virile at how old? 26 years old. Remember, our sexual peak is at 19 years old. How many of you men remember that? 19, all you thought about was that. I don't know how I went through school, to be honest with you. That's all I thought about, 24 hours a day. We start fading. Women, you sexually peak 35, 40, 45 years old. Another point we make in this, and the men aren't going to like this, is it's perfectly fine for an old fart like me, if I were a little crazy, to have a 20-year-old girl on my... If you saw me prancing around here in town, you'd say, oh, that's perfectly fine. Look at that guy. He's got this younger. Now, how about an old fart woman? You had some 19-year-old stud puppy on. All the other women would say, look at that shit. Right? But God always knows more than we do. Biology prevails. Biology says women should have younger men. If we sexually peak at 19, you sexually peak at 40, what's that message? You women, rethink what's going on. But social abnormality says, well, you can't do that, right? The peacocks can do that. A perfect storm appears when we succumb to the unnatural and man-created fiascos of material disillusionment, corporate manipulation of our food supply, and the lethargy that these pseudo-luxuries encourage. Remember that term, pseudo-luxuries. Oh, I have enough money to have food, a big house, a car. Yeah? There's pseudo-luxuries. The real luxury in life is to have a heart and have values and have faith and have trust and have commitment. They're the values. Our personal self-sabotage places the cherry on the cake of our inevitable, painful, perceived destiny. We create our destinies, and then we blame other people for it. And just like a bad destiny you created, man, you can change it. I have the great privilege, Anna Maria has a great, every single day, to watch people change their destinies. Some of these people have been to 20, 30, 40 doctors, world-leading expert, and everyone said, you're going to die. And they choose, I'm not going to die. Isn't that amazing? It's amazing. But it's your choice. If you keep thinking about it, you're going to be run over. At rush hour, that truck's coming, not going to wait for you. You better start running. Forget reading, run. Our natural connection. As humans, we were once threads woven into the tapestry of the planet and universe. We gained our strength, confidence, and passion from the entirety of all life. We were part of something bigger than us. Today, we're lost and confused. Without this connection, we reach out to create substance out of nothing, resulting in our own personal and human destruction. This was one of my best friends in the world. Anna Maria, this is the only woman Anna ever had to worry about. I was intellectually in love with this woman. We were like two kids. She was a professor at University of California, Los Angeles. She had more students sign up for her class than anyone in the history of the universities of California. If you were a high school senior and you knew you were going to go there, you begged to get in by senior year. And Dr. Hunt was an amazing person. I'm going to show you some work she did. a book that I've been composing for 7.5 years. Usually I write a book to 2 books a year. And this one I can't put down because more data and research is constantly coming in. Quantum Human Biology. She and I started that book. She died about 3-4 years ago at 98 years old, yeah. So Dr. Hunt filmed the disparity between death and life. Only in this case, it's shown how we choose our course of action or future by consuming that which resonates with our consciousness. So I want you to see, these are bad films because they go back to 83. These were done at the University of California. And the first one we're going to show you is a guy eating junk food. He's the top runner at the university then. He was winning all kind of medals and went to the Olympics. So here he's eating what most of you ate most of your life. Candy bars, sodas, hamburgers, and French fries. Now that's American food. You bet. Maybe that's why we're where we're at today. So you can't see it, but maybe we can put these lights off just for 1 second to see it. Yeah, try to put all of them off. But around him, as he swallows, he actually reduces the energy field around his body. Put him on 2 quarts of water, cleaned it up, put him on raw food. And this is only 15 minutes later. So now he's eating raw food. Yeah, you can see it better now. You see the energy field around him? So the energy field literally went away on a junk food diet, disappeared. And within a matter of 2 minutes, when he started to consume, his Adam's apple would go up and down, and literally you'd see the energy field. Now, this is what we're testing at Hippocrates. So we have the most advanced scientific testing when you come as a guest. It's called CyberScan and BioWell, Russian and German technology. Then we back it up with all the sophisticated blood tests we can. But this is what we're looking for. Here's to show you how you connect it. This is in Santa Monica, guy throwing stones. And watch how when the waves come in, the energy from the wave connects with his energy field. Isn't that amazing? So this is why we love going outside and walking in nature, so do more of it. You know, we're water people. You know, we love being near the water and beach, and it gives you life. This is interesting. This is about 2 hours outside of Los Angeles, up in the mountains. And watch this. This is really amazing. This is where it was dusk, so the lighting was pretty good here. See, this is what you and I do, by the way. You don't know this, but we're connecting to all of this around us. Now watch as he relaxes more, what happens. See the crown in his head? More relaxing, more profound energy. See that? This is interesting. Watch what happens with the child. Now, the child's very focused energy. Child's more conscious than we are. We have a concept as we get older, we get wiser. When you're just born, you're the wisest you'll ever be in your life. So the child's from the crown, the energy. And watch as the child gets close to the father, how his energy field increases. This is why we all love to kiss and hug babies. So we're getting energy from the child. They're so pure. Watch this. It touches the hand, it triples. It triples in energy. Now watch when she prays. This next one. It's amazing. So, you know, just average energy. Now the child comes down, touches the child, doubles in energy. Now watch what happens when they start to pray. Isn't that amazing? So this is why, you know, there's such research now on prayer, meditation, contemplation. Why? Because it relaxes, it gets rid of the stress. It allows the what system to work? The immune system. So you're looking at future medicine. You know, it's sad that we have to be the pioneers in this. It's really sad. You know, this is the way the world should work at this point. It's so simple and so real. Give people living food, they come back to life. Give people positive thought, eliminate the stress. And, you know, magic happens. What looks like magic is just biology. Over the last 6 decades, we have been helping people find their way back to themselves by empowering them with living, raw, vegan fare. This not only elevates their ability for the entire bodily system to function at maximum levels, it also sparks consciousness, helping the person to normalize. From now on, Science must relinquish its previous dogma and embrace the power of universal connectivity. So what used to be considered, wishy-washy stuff is the most significant and powerful science today. It's called quantum biology that we're talking about. And so pretty much everything that's being practiced, even by the alternative doctors, is gone. It's passé. We're in a whole new degeneration now. So when you come, I have a whole department of energy medicine. I have $2.5 million worth of equipment. I have to bring mostly from around the world. And when we plug you into that, what it does is remarkable. Just remarkable. It brings you back to the state you should be at, that you were born with many times. Now, if you can keep your head together and fuel your body correctly, you can maintain that level. And what that does is literally protect you from aging and free radical damage, the cause of all disease. And if you're sick, you need that, because when you're sick, you're multiplying, dramatically multiplying cell death. And when cell death occurs at a high level, more viruses, more bacteria, more molds, and more cancers happen. So the sooner you do this, the better it is, no matter what you're putting yourself through. Here's a great story. The hardest people I work with are engineers, bankers, mathematicians, and architects. My father's an architect. When they get sick, they're so analytical that most of them die. This guy was really sick. So I recall he had stage 4 melanoma, was it? You have stage 4 melanoma, that's it. There's certain diseases, many cancers, that they have zero success rate. They're going to lie to you. There's a wonderful movie a colleague from LA did years ago, 10 years ago. You should all look at it if you know one with cancer, called Healing Cancer from the Inside. He lost his father to cancer treatment, and so he was just so pissed. He was a filmmaker. He made this film. And he showed you how they screw you with the numbers. They use something called relative numbers. So there are certain cancers they have never had a success with anywhere in the world's history in medicine. Brain cancer is one. Liver cancer is another. Pancreatic cancer and melanoma is another. Advanced bone cancer is another. And so the list goes on. And what they do is they know that 100% of people are going to die, but the only disease they put a 5-year criteria on is cancer. If you're a diabetic and recover from diabetes, 30 years from now, they're going to call you a diabetic. Because they don't make money in diabetes. They make big money. $500,000 to $750,000 on each patient giving you nuclear medicine. So if they know, for instance, if you have stage 4 melanoma, they take 5,000 people. The first year, 4,000 die. And that's not unrealistic, by the way. The second year, 750 die. The third year, 240 die. Do you follow me? The fourth year, 9 die. The fifth year, none die. One guy dies 1 day after 5 years. You know what they tell you? It's a 50% success rate. Because if he's expected to die at 5 years and lower, if he makes it 1 day longer, they're going to say, we beat the odds. Challenge anything I say. So this is how they actually train the doctors, and the doctors don't want to know this because they're too bright, they don't want to know it. I had a dean of a major Ivy League medical school in my office because his wife healed liver cancer at Hippocrates. And he was a typical man about my age, and he was ingratiating me and saying how wonderful it was I saved his wife. So I listened for 2 or 3 minutes, and I stopped him. I said, by the way, I didn't save your wife. How long have you been married? He said, 40 years. I said, your wife saved herself. And I said, you ought to be happy because a guy like you, if she died, you wouldn't know what the hell to do. I said, so what I strongly suggest is that you get up, go out and hug your wife, and thank her for loving you enough to stay here. And as he's walking out of the room, he said, I'll do anything to help you. And I said, no. Then I said, wait a minute. Come back and sit down. I said, since I was a boy in my 20s, I've been wondering, do you train oncologists, cancer doctors, to rapidly engage people in therapies? He said, absolutely. He said, we know if we give them a day or two to think about it, they'll remember all the dead family members they have. So we railroad them into protocols. So he admitted, if I didn't have this guy's trust because of what happened with his wife, he would never have told me that. He said, that's part of the training for oncologists. Pretty scary stuff. So Ben was one of these engineers, analytical, but I went to every good doctor in Canada. He was from Canada, Toronto, St. Anne's and the best hospitals there. Went to Toronto University Hospital. They all said I'm going to die. they're giving me palliative care. You know what that is? We know you're going to die, but you have good insurance, so we're going to give you palliative care. That's what that means. You're going to croak anyway, but we'll make a few bucks on the way to die. That's literally what that means. You say, oh, Bryan, you're being harsh. Am I? Maybe I'm telling you things that you never heard before, but it's not harsh. So this guy was a hard one to change. So Benjamin Stone is a perfect example of a man who thought and ate himself into severe disease, facing catastrophic melanoma and given a death sentence by unenlightened expert physicians. I always say, if you go to a physician that say you're going to die, keep going till you find one that says you're not. Please, don't go along with that one. So here he is. Look at how sick he was. So we did an energy field testing on him. See, he looked several years ago in the grips of disease. Note the lack of biofrequency emitting from his bodies and consciousness. Look at this. This is after he healed himself. Anyone notice a difference? He looks about 20 years younger. By the way, he's flourishing. He bought a farm, stopped being an engineer, bought a farm. He's now raising vegetables somewhere up above Toronto somewhere. Ben Stone. Here's just a fraction of 1%. Samantha Young, another Canadian. Never forget, 30 years ago she came into my office. She cried like a baby. She had me crying. She said, you know, I had my last baby, 20 years ago, and my husband left me that day. So I had to raise my five daughters alone. And she did. And they were all doing well. And they said, I can't die. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Zero success. I can't die. Because they have nobody. I'm the only one in their family. What do you say to somebody? I'm not going to lie to her. That's a tough one. I see people get well, but it's not when I see everyone get well, let me put it. Certain diseases, if you have early stage breast cancer, not what she had, but early stage normal breast cancer, carcinoma, you don't get well, something's wrong with you. Early stage prostate cancer, something's wrong with you. But the reality is, you have pancreatic cancer, stage 4, it's tough. If we prolong your life, I'm happy. Some of them, I know about 200 they got well. In 50 years, the odds aren't good on that. Gets herself well. I just talked to her. She's coming, I think, pretty soon. She's coming. She lives out in Vancouver now. Chronic fatigue, another made-up disease. Fibromyalgia, another made-up disease. Chronic pain from it's not made up, though. These are inflammatory conditions within cells, within tissue of the body. Just have to get rid of the inflammation. Completely well. This guy was the sickest guy that year. We get really sick people. Remember how sick he was? We had nurse watch on him like 3 times a day. We'd have somebody call him in the middle of the night. He had obesity, cirrhosis of the liver, completely, his liver was shut down practically. Hepatitis C, which, by the way, the drugs they have now, I send people to. Harvoni and the other drugs, they work. Now, sadly, if you've taken interferon, interleukin and previously, they only work in half the cases. If you've never taken a drug before, I say do that and then get on the Hippocrates diet to rebuild. So there's a medicine that does work. I can't talk of many of them, but that's one of them. Okay, completely got himself well. Cervical cancer, easy stuff. This was an interesting one. We have a big party once a year called Raw Fest. And that year we had a 50s theme. Everyone came dressed up as 50s, and we had a dance competition. And the dance competition, you won a free week at Hippocrates. Well, she came to us with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and won the dance competition. And when she received the award, the paper, she cried and said, yes, yesterday the doctors told me I was free of cancer. It was just one of those events I'll never forget. There's highlights in your life. This was my, I shouldn't have favorite guests. These are my favorite guests ever. Blind couple, totally in love. They were like Anna Marie and I. He never saw her, and all he would say all day long is how beautiful she is. She would say how handsome he was. Never saw each other, completely blind. They don't sit around and whine about being blind. They're out teaching blind people. Not only do they come through and heal their diabetes and a number of other things and their arthritis, but also came back and became health educators and in the blind community teach our program. You're sitting around worrying about, oh God, I don't have what I should have. Shit. Wake up.
He's driving a motorcycle. He
You're kidding me. Yep. I didn't know that. Yeah. They actually train them. Well, I mean, we see them ski sometimes. That freaks me out. I'm worried about the stoners on snowboards, not the blind skiers. One of those stoners hit me one time, remember? Prostate cancer, that's easy. I mean, that's an easy one. This woman was sick for 35 years. Her kidney cancer went completely away. The favorite thing Anna Marie and I do is help young couples have babies. And it's not as, I'm so used to people healing disease, that sort of gets boring after a while. But young couples who can't have babies, that turns us on because we love being parents and grandparents. And they were told as often, you know, you'll never have babies, etc. We used to have pictures of all, not all, but many, many of the families that were told 10 years ago, 15, can't have babies. How many dozen did we have? 4 or 5 dozen? We ran out of space where people would do. And it was just wonderful to see. And you know, how many of you know 1/3 of the young married couples can't have babies now? It's everything I'm talking about. They're filled with deadly chemicals and obese. This woman is a funny one. Stage 4 melanoma, comes to the end of the program, walks into my office. This is the graduation day, the 21st day. Says, I can't do this. I'm an American. I was a cheerleader. I was eating hot dogs and hamburgers and French fries. I gave it my best, but I just can't do it. So I hugged her and said goodbye. I said, well, you know, we love you anyway. So off she goes. I forget about her. The next year, I'm speaking in Clearwater, Florida, on the beach. Not on the beach, but in the beach community. And the room's filled with 200 people, and she's sitting in the front. She's a very quiet woman. And she keeps grabbing my leg, like this, the pant leg. And said, I want to talk. I said, what the hell is she going to say? So finally I said, okay, you can get up and talk. She said, just yesterday, she went to the second top doctor in the world on melanoma, who's at University of South Florida in Tampa. That's where the guy is. And she says, I'm completely free. They've never seen a case like this before. I said, what did you say to them? I wanted to tell him how I live. He wasn't interested. I've worked with thousands of people who have recovered from diseases. Do you know how many doctors have called me back? 5. Now, if I thought my patient was going to die, and if they got well, and I knew they were well, I didn't think they were well, I had the evidence they were well, I'd get on a plane and find out how that happened. 5 doctors out of thousands, that's not a joke, thousands of people who recover. Type 2 diabetes, if you don't get well within 6 months, you're not doing what I tell you. 85% of people with type 2 diabetes are well in 3 months, and at Hippocrates, 3 to 4 dozen within the 3-week program get well. And some of them have been diabetics 25 years. This depends upon how your body responds, your metabolism. If you have type 2 diabetes, if you do this, you will get well. 100%. There's no chance you're not. Heart disease. 97% of you will recover from heart disease. If you have a valve problem, I can't fix that. I'll send you to a great surgeon to do that one. Valve problems are different. Now, can you regrow valves if they're not that bad? Sure. You can regrow anything. But the reality is it may not work. But you can regrow it. And I tried that first, unless you were really bad. If you were passing out because of a valve, I'd drive you to the surgeon and do that. So there's times and places you have to combine these things. We stand at a crossword that will determine our individual and collective fate, shaping humanity's future. Life begets life, and there is no doubt that you will gain the energy, initiative, and awareness to become a participatory member of our rediscovered humanity. Just take charge of your life. So give yourself a hand for enduring that. Now, you have any questions at all, we'll answer about 4 or 5 questions, and then I'll sign books, and we'll dance, and we'll leave. Okay? Any questions anyone have? Yes.
Thank you for coalescing all that and making me not feel so insane.
You were thinking it, but yes.
It's good to be reminded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, to look at the forest here, I mean, we're kind of putting together a bunch of trees. It seems to me like people are breeding in captivity, especially here.
Yeah.
What's going to stop that?
Well, you know, what's really amazing is that in my worldwide travels, I start to realize there's a new sense of awareness that's not a fabricated awareness and consciousness. It's a genuine, heartfelt awakening that's occurring on the planet now. And the statisticians tell us that we need about 17.5 to 18% to shift humanity. We're about 12.5 to 13% now. And so it's a global effort. And even Americans are doing things I thought would take a lot longer for them to do. For instance, young people your age and younger, they don't hang out at pizza parlors anymore. Bowl restaurants are hip for them. Now, it sounds like a silly thing, but that's pretty powerful. You know, one generation ago it was pizza parlors and hamburgers. Now where they aspire. When I go to a place like New York City or even here, you'll stand in line outside sometimes to get into a bowl place. You start to see the exercising is changing. And it used to be something that if you got sick or had a heart problem or you're overweight, you exercise. Now it's part of the culture. So the majority of young people is part of the culture. I'm not saying everyone, because we wouldn't have so many obese people. But the percentages are dramatically moving forward. And then, you know, we study the larger picture. And the larger picture is, and we do a presentation I did in Chicago the other day, and talk about the predictions from futurists. Do all of you know what a futurist is? So they take the smartest people in the world, and that's not an embellishment. So they get the smartest people, Nobel laureates, the women and men at the top of their field, and they get them in the room with a think tank, and they said, now let's look at the data, let's look at the trends, not the fads, but the trends, and let's see where we're going to be. So the question was 2050. So now they are saying we are going to be holistically living. Not because all at once we became enlightened people, 100% of us, but because 18% of us became enlightened. And that's all it took to spark it. And it's not sustainable what we do. It's like Americans take credit, you know, oh, Ronald Reagan made Russia fall. Russia ran out of money. Why the healthcare system's going to fail is it's not sustainable. It doesn't work. Why eating bad food isn't going to work because 72% of our kids are obese. And eventually even corrupt governments are going to have to say, shit, we can't sustain that. You know, so we have to put food into schools, put food that works. So I'm an incredible optimist, but scientifically validated optimist. So I think things are changing and improving. I have thank God for Elon Musk. They said it's not able to be done. Not only did he create a viable electric car, he created a hip viable electric car. By the way, you're going to have nothing but electric cars in 25 years. Not a hope. It's going to happen, love. Countries, like Anna's country has said, you know, in 25 years, you're not going to be able to have a motorized car. They'll just phase them out. And in legitimate places in the world, they'll actually say, okay, if you can't afford to do it, we'll buy your car back and you can get a down payment on the electric car. That's how it is. Norway has more electric Teslas, for instance, than the United States. You go into a taxi, there's a 50% chance you're in a Tesla there. So the world is changing. It's changing. And I also think the internet, as bad as it is, I mean, the number one thing they tell me they look at on the internet is pornography. But the reality is, my children have a totally different view of reality than I had. I used to hear about the Chinese. All I ever thought of, the Chinese were all starving. So, even in class, I liked history. We didn't really study Chinese history. My kids speak to people in China on the internet. It's, you know, the level is different. It's playing field. You just got to watch for the corruption. If they, as I've just pointed out with vaccines, they've corrupted it. And they could mold your mind as they're doing in China. They're molding the minds of people. So they're saying, you can't see this. You can't see Facebook. You can't see advertisement. So you basically are ignorant to what's really possible. But guess what? There's a good friend of mine that's creating the new internet. So there's a group of highly wealthy, highly sophisticated people that are creating the new internet. So once we corrupt something, Facebook's corrupted already, Google's on the way out, basically they're going to have the next one. And it will be free. They'll make it completely free. You know, things I'm shocked at that are free today that you had to pay a lot of money for 5 years ago. So just hold on, eat right, keep conscious, hang around hip people, you know. Just don't be drained by the negative people. That's the problem. You know, I realized in my life I can't avoid negativity, but the point, I don't hang out with negative people. You know, even in my own family. I don't hang out with negative family members. I'll love them, and I do love them. I'll kiss them, and I'll leave. I'll say, enough of that shit. Heard enough about that, enough. Keep going.
So are you concerned about 5G?
Very concerned. So at Hippocrates now, we show a 2-hour film. You're smart. There's 2 films I'm going to tell you to watch now. They're both free, so write them down. One is called 5G Apocalypse. We have a radio program that's also a podcast that you can see some of the past programs on the Hippocrates website. You'll see him on in the next month. This is a philanthropic guy out of England that did the film on it. And you can load it down on the internet and watch it. The second one is Dominion. How many of you know there's a law in all of the free world except for Australia that says if you go into a factory farm with a camera, you go to jail for 30 years? How many of you knew that? You're a free country that you live in. So there are people in jail that filmed in factory farms. Australia made a mistake. They didn't have that law. So they just made a film you can see for free called Dominion. So they go into factory farms. Anyone that would watch that film and consume any level of animal food, you're a sadist and a pervert at that point. There's no question. They really show the gruesome. The last one I saw, Anna Maria could only watch 10 minutes of it. She cried. I had to shut it off and watch it back. That was done by Woody Harrelson. He snuck into, not him, but he had people sneak in to the American ones. And I don't know how many of you are Jewish here or know about the Jewish law. That was the worst. They were supposed to humanely bleed the animal. That was where the biggest perversion was going on. They would hang the live animal up and slit its neck as it was coming down the assembly line. And they vividly showed all of this. But Dominion's beautifully done. It's well filmed. And they did it with flyovers, and they went in and they saw it. But if you just see what's going on, I mean, it is outrageous. Yes.
Is that Dominion the same thing as the book Dominion? Is it the same people?
I don't know. I didn't even know there was a book, so you're ahead of me on that.
There is a book, and it does have to do with that
Good.
subject.
It's probably the same. You've just taught me something. I didn't know that. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? I cheer you all up tonight?
I have one in terms of the emotional abuse person. Were you able to help any of
Oh yeah, I mean, not everyone was 1,100 pounds, but with Dick, we probably ran about 75, 80 people through. Most of them were 300 pounds, 400 pounds, and all but about 5 of them got better. And some of them I see occasionally,
Was there any correlation between what you do with your?
Oh yeah, I mean, we have a weight loss academy at Hippocrates. And I'm not saying because I'm the director. Nothing in the world compares to that. I have a team of exercise physiologists in our diet, and then we do psychotherapy along with. That's the most important. And I wish somebody sat me down when I was fat like that and smoking cigarettes and said, you have a good life. What the hell are you screwing with yourself for? That's what I really needed at that point. You're overeating for absolutely no reason. Yeah, white boy syndrome. What do they call that now? The privileged? What is it called? Yeah, we're privileged. That's Some of my friends were skinny, fit, strong. They should have been fat. They had all the reason in the world to overeat. Yes.
I was just going to ask, when it showed that glow of the energy field.
Yes.
Is that the same thing as we sometimes read about the aura?
Well, aura was the old way. This is more sophisticated. They use chromium photography. Remember, this was done at the University of California, Los Angeles. And Dr. Hunt was the pioneer. When they wanted to send men to the moon, she was a scientist they called up and said, how are they going to walk on the moon? She made the suits for them. But, she was such a shrewd, smart person and kind person. She said to them, I'll make the suits, but you've got to make a meter for me that picks up the most subtle energy that's ever been picked up. Now, there were meters always picking up energy. So she wasn't happy till they made it 5 times stronger, pick up 5 times deeper subtle energy. Today we call this 0-point gravity. So she was actually using that technology, we call it the Hunt meter, out of gratitude for her. I write about this in my book, and they put it in chromium photography. So you're picking up things. Now today we can pick these up with cyber scan. When you come to Hippocrates, as an example, we put your hand on a machine, and within 30 seconds we come up with 100,000 areas of your body they look at. 30 seconds, bing, that's all it takes. And it's all energy fields. Then we put your fingers on a machine, that takes a minute. That's Russian technology. We look at the biofrequency field of every cell, the organ systems, and then the overall system, and the alignment of your energy. And when you see the technology, to me, it's a mortal sin that doctors aren't trained to do these things, because they miss so much with this. We're capturing 85 to 90% more than you can at the best hospitals, and you have great hospitals here in Ohio. Yeah. If you went to the best hospital. Now, they do things we don't do, but the bottom line is everything that they do, right, we do more and get what they have. Yeah.
And is that the same as what they call vibrational healing?
Yes.
Okay, that's
so
the same thing.
Last night in Indianapolis, I met a young nurse who basically does that. And she said, I can't let anyone know, and the few nurses that do, they make fun of me. There's over 500,000 nurses in America that do touch healing. Mm-hmm. And exactly, healing touch. And the administrators don't know, or they'd be fired. And one of the fathers of that was a wonderful doctor out of Yale called Dr. Bernie Siegel. You remember Bernie Siegel, right? And Bernie used to sneak up to us from Connecticut, and we'd have 10 of us in the room in Boston and listening to him. He was just so happy to have an audience. And he said, what I started to notice is I'd go to the patients that were not even that sick, but they had no visitors. No families would come, no friends would come, and they would get sick and they'd die. And he said, so I just couldn't let that happen. He was just a young doctor. He said, I would hold their hand and I would tell them stories. And he finally got fired out of Yale because they said, you're wasting time. You need to see 50 patients a day, not 5. And so he wrote books on it. Love, Healing, and Miracles was one of his books. Yeah, and Bernie was really one of the fathers of that movement. Kubler-Ross, how many of you remember Kubler-Ross? She was the first one that let us come to terms with dying. We're all going to die. So, like dying was something you didn't think about until the day you were dying. Then you didn't like to think about it. So she started to say dying is a natural process. So let's talk about that. So there were that generation in the 70s of people, they did a whole lot of service. One of my good friends, I went in front of Congress with him, was a writer at that point, Norman Cousins. Oh, yeah. How many remember Norman's story? Yeah, Norman wrote for a great magazine called the Saturday Evening Post. And he goes to a friend of his who's a doctor. He's feeling horrible. He's just young, and he has an inoperable heart problem he's going to die from. And his friend says, look, I'd like to lie to you, but you're going to die. So he loves his wife and children. He can't face them, so he makes up a lie. He says to his wife, I'm sent to Los Angeles. I've got to interview people. And he locked himself into a hotel in New York and watched Marx Brothers films. Just laughed and cried, laughed and cried. And I think the next Thursday, as I recall, he had to go to the doctor again. And the doctor turned white in the face and couldn't believe it and said, did I see you last week? He said, yeah, we spent 2 hours here. And we joked together and we cried together. He said, you no longer have a problem, Norman. And the doctor had no way to describe it, just spontaneous remission. But they don't know what it is. They just chalk it up to. And he finally concluded, because he was a bright guy, I laughed it out of myself. And everyone said, oh, you're crazy. You don't laugh these things out of you. He became a professor at the University of California, matter of fact, sought after, and he was actually teaching doctors and nurses in the medical program there, about the importance of humor. How about Patch Adams? Also lost a job. Wonderful doctor, dressed up as a clown, was helping to heal people in hospitals. We all take ourselves, including the natural guys, too damn serious. That's it. Just relax. Everything's going to be fine. Just got to be happy, man. Why you're sick is you're not happy. Why you're eating shit, you're not happy. That's it. Okay. Yes.
You and Anna have been traveling for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Could you share your diet? What did you?
Oh, we never miss a beat. So the good news is you have Whole Food markets and LA Fitness everywhere. So there are plugins, juice bars everywhere. Now, what I hate is that damn, cold pressed juice nonsense.
Yeah, that's
I mean, we get a lot of that stuff, so it's not the same as fresh raw juice with sprouts in it. But today and you pay outrageous amounts of money. The other day I bought 3 juices for $40 in Chicago. I could have made those juices at home for $5. That's not a joke, yeah. So they screw you. And this is yuppie stuff, as I say. They give it to the yuppie. But the reality is, you can always do it. I don't go any, like, we go to odd places, I always suspect that we're not going to. We go to Warsaw, Poland. Now, all I ever knew as a kid, the Poles ate nothing but kielbasa, period. Some of the best raw food and vegan restaurants in the world I've ever been to are in Warsaw, Poland. We're going to be there later in May, too. Yeah. Lithuania. Now, who the hell thinks they have vegans in Lithuania? My hotel's here. I walk 150 steps. One of the best raw food restaurants I've ever been to. Better than anything in America. It was certainly better than any raw food restaurant in America. So it's there. You just have to have a focus on what's important. You've got to elevate yourself to humanity. That's what I'm doing. You know, we're living at a subhuman level. We're running around like a bunch of rats in a maze, thinking, we can't do it, we can't. There's nothing you can't do, man. That guy picked up with one hand 7,000 pounds. That's not bullshit. That's what he did. Can you do that? Maybe not. I can't do it. But the reality is, what I want to do, I always do. There's nothing I want to do I don't do. Yeah. So, any more thoughts or questions? Last question. Yes.
I saw on a podcast, Mel Gibson, he went on, I guess, talked about how stem cells didn't help his father, I think he was wheelchair bound. So do you have any thoughts on stem cells?
A lot. One of my faculty members is the top stem cell doctor in America. His name's Dr. Maharaj. So the people that can afford his services and do what we do, they get better from catastrophic disease. Maharaj, when I first, this is a funny story. My boy, who's young, he's in Sweden now, studying the language to go to medical school in Sweden. So hopefully he'll be the next director of Hippocrates in 10 years. We pray. I'll be in my 80s by then. Anna says we have to work till the day we die. Well, these Swedes are tough. They're Vikings, you know. So anyway, his mother's a doctor too. And she kept saying, oh, my relative, he's a stem cell. And let me tell you, most of these stem cell doctors are quacks. They're taking umbilical stem cells from somebody else, injecting it, and if you're lucky by mistake, it works. So that's what I thought he was. So finally, after a year, I was embarrassed, kept making up stories, I can't go to see him. So we went. We were shocked. So he goes to the FDA, he wasn't frightened. He said, I want to work on cancer. They don't let people. I want to work on MS. I want to work on ALS. And they said, sure you can, but you have to have a hospital. You have to do it. You have to do it on this. He got the hospital. He has the machines. He has the top. He's a Eastern Indian, born and raised in Scotland, educated by the top stem cell doctor in Europe. And now, if you go to a conference on stem cell, half the time he's a keynote speaker. He's been in my faculty for 5 years. But it's expensive. So you're talking 50, 60, 70 grand to start with. And the people with money who can do that, and I used to, frankly, Anna and I thought, because we come from working families. And for really poor people, we give scholarships. Not bullshit artists that want to get in there cheap, but real. We shake you down. So we give scholarships. We don't turn anyone around. We don't turn anyone around. And the reality is, we thought he was overcharging. When I saw what he was doing, I don't know how he does it for that little, to be honest with you. Honest. You know, one machine where they freeze the stem cells cost $500,000. He has a number of those machines. And by the way, they don't put them in there and then you use them. They keep them in there. So now when you recover from cancer or multiple sclerosis or whatever else, and now you have a relapse or you're eating candy bars in 10 years, they pull your stem cells out. And his real ambition is, he's a young guy, he's 60 or so now. I'm going to say young, but he's not 80. His ambition is to get every young person, 17-year-old person, to put our stem cells in. He's after us all of the time, but we're old farts now. He said, if you cook 17-year-old stem cells and put it in, the person could lose their legs and grow them back in 30 years, 40 years, because we're going to have that technology. He wasn't joking, by the way. We're finding ways to multiply organ functions, et cetera. So the geneticists are going to help us. Genetics are going to take over biology. The future of medicine is going to be lifestyle, stem cells, and genetics. That's it. That's where it's all heading to. And the diseases we have today, including cancer in 25 years, won't be a problem like they are today. And we'll have other diseases because of radiation we're getting and electromagnetic and 5G. If you really study 5G, when you see this film, you're going to, have tissue next to you, you're going to freak out. Between that and Dominion. Because 5G comes from the Pentagon. How we got the first real dope on it, we had a guest come through who was a nuclear physicist that worked with the CIA. He flipped. He became one of us. He said, we use this technology to maim people. He said, there's different frequencies within the band of 5G. He said, but the higher frequencies, we use it as warfare. So when you heard about the American embassy, the Canadian embassy, that was 5G. You're going to see on this film military guys out of England that said, I was the guy they sent into Northern Ireland to get the Catholics settled down. They all ended up in the hospital. So they sit in buildings a half a mile away and project that on it. So they use it as warfare. So it's the same band that they're using, lower frequency. And it's going to permeate walls and everything else. It's just going to go right through you. And long-term erosion of cellular frequency is not only going to create the obvious neurological system problems as well as cancers, but mental illness, bone development. Because cells, you're made of cells. So if the cells are doing this rather than doing this, eventually everything's going to be inherently weaker. You're going to have gaps within the anatomy. So thanks for listening. I'll sign some books and be well.
Awesome.
Yes.